Scientists have just ruled out the worst-case scenario for climate change. That scenario predicted temperatures could rise by more than 3.5 degrees by the end of the century. It's now seen as unrealistic by experts, thanks to years of climate policy and the shift to cleaner energy. And that's not the only bit of progress worth talking about. Solar and battery storage made up 91% of new power added in the US. South Africa has rolled out a powerful new HIV prevention drug. And this year saw the most baby right whales born in a single season since 2009. Hey guys, I'm Freddy, and these are the best good news stories from August. Now, let's dive deeper into the climate update. Climate scientists have just published their most detailed update in years on where the planet is heading. It's the biggest change to their forecast in over a decade. The update narrows things down to 7 scenarios, removing the extremes at both ends. That includes the previous worst-case scenario, which expected temperatures to rise by 3.5 to 5.5 degrees by the end of the century. That scenario assumed little climate action and a huge surge in fossil fuels. But neither of those things happened. That's because real progress has been made. Solar and wind power have gotten much cheaper than expected. That drop in cost means many countries are now building far less new coal capacity. As a result, global coal use has stopped growing the way it used to. But unfortunately, the best-case scenario is gone too. In the new scenarios, the world is expected to pass 1.5 degrees of warming. Scientists have treated that number as a safety limit for over a decade. Now, they predict temperatures will climb past it, but they can still come back down. Scientists call this an overshoot scenario. The longer that overshoot lasts, the higher the risk of permanent damage, like the Amazon rainforest drying out or Greenland's ice sheet melting. So, the race is now to keep the overshoot as short as possible. And for that, tackling methane emissions is one of our greatest opportunities. Methane is estimated to account for about 30% of global warming. While it's over 80 times more potent than CO2 in the short term, methane has a relatively short lifetime in the atmosphere. CO2 stays in the atmosphere for hundreds of years, but methane already breaks down after 7 to 12 years. By cutting methane emissions from meat production and fossil fuel leaks today, we will see noticeable effects within a decade. And for every fraction of a degree less, the world saves money and, most importantly, saves lives. Staying close to 1.5 degrees means less extreme weather for people around the world. That's the opportunity still on the table. And scientists say with enough effort, it's still within reach. Over in the Pacific, one country just made history. In Papua New Guinea, a huge new ocean reserve has just been created. It covers an area about the size of the UK, and no fishing will be allowed inside it at all. The reserve partially overlaps the Bismarck Sea, a region located in the Coral Triangle. It's one of the most biodiverse places for reef ecosystems. The waters here hold more than 700 kinds of reef fish and over 300 types of hard coral. Now, the ocean here isn't just scenery. About 10% of all the tuna caught in the world comes from Papua New Guinea's waters. For a lot of people here, fishing is how they make a living. And this new reserve covers 7% of the country's fishing waters. So, banning all fishing across it sounds like it could hurt the very people who rely on it. But it actually tends to work the other way around. When you stop fishing inside a reserve, the fish there recover and start to grow. The reserve fills up and the extra fish begin to spill out across its edges. They move into the waters where people are still allowed to fish. And we know this happens because scientists have measured it. A team at the University of Hawaii looked at 9 large reserves across the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Near their edges, tuna catches had gone up by between 12 and 18%. That way, people can still make a living from the sea, while marine life gets a chance to recover. And it also adds to something much bigger. Countries around the world have agreed to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030. You might remember that goal from my video in June. And earlier this year, the world passed a milestone. For the first time, more than 10% of the ocean is now protected. And reserves like this one keep pushing that number up. Staying with wildlife, here's a recovery story from England. A bird that almost became extinct in the UK 60 years ago has just hit record numbers. It's a small bird which lives on the heathland of southern England, which is one of the rarest habitats in the country. Back in the 1960s, its numbers fell sharply, until only a few pairs were left down in Dorset. Part of the problem was that its home was disappearing too. Across southern England, a lot of the open heathland it depends on has been lost. The land had been planted over with rows of conifer trees for timber. So, a charity called the RSPB set out to restore it. They cleared those trees away and let the heath return. Bit by bit, the scattered patches were joined into one. And as the habitat came back, so did the bird. Last year, a survey across RSPB reserves counted 264 pairs. That's up 44% in just 5 years, the most ever recorded in these reserves. For one of England's rarest birds, the future looks a lot safer. Let's now head across the Atlantic. In the United States, solar and battery storage made up 91% of new electricity capacity added in this year's first quarter. In the past, companies building these large solar farms could claim money back from the government. The support made them much cheaper to build. But last year, the Trump administration got a major source of help for solar and wind. Now, companies had far less time to claim it and tougher conditions to meet. You would expect all of that to slow the expansion of renewables down. But surprisingly, the opposite happened. Solar grew faster than ever, and the curve climbs faster every year. The reason is simple. Renewables can be built much quicker. Gas plants can take around 4 years to build, whereas solar farms can be up and running in under half that time. And speed matters more than ever, because America suddenly needs a lot more electricity. Renewables are not just quicker to build, but also cheaper and less vulnerable to global energy shocks. Most of this new solar is going up in red states. That's partly because these states have plenty of open land and receive a lot of sunlight. Texas built more than anywhere else. Florida, Ohio, and Michigan were not far behind. And solar shows no sign of slowing down, which means more clean power reaching millions of Americans. Now let's move to animal news, because an abandoned fish farm has been transformed into a beaver paradise. Beavers love to build stuff. The dams and canals they make hugely benefit local wildlife and environments. Beavers create deep ponds, canals, and shallow wetlands. These habitats support a wide range of animals and plants, and they also reduce the risk of flooding, drought, and water pollution. Thousands of years ago, there were millions of beavers. But in the 1600s, demand for beaver products exploded. Their fur made excellent coats and hats, and lots of money. And so did the scent glands they used to mark their territory. With their vanilla-smelling scent, they were used to make perfume and medicines. Over the next 200 years, 99.9% of their population was wiped out. By the early 1900s, there were only about 1,200 of them left in Europe. And this had a devastating effect on animals, plants, and environments. Luckily, beavers began to bounce back. They were reintroduced back into the wild in over 20 European countries. And one of these countries was Poland. In 1928, there were only about 250 beavers there. Now there are over 100,000, just in Poland. And that's also thanks to the work of organizations like Rewilding Oder Delta. Their goal is to restore beaver populations across Poland and Germany. Recently, Planet Wild teamed up with them and raised 100,000 euros. With that money, they bought an abandoned fish farm that's about half the size of Vatican City and transformed it into a beaver habitat. But bringing beavers back also means helping people coexist with them. That's why Planet Wild also funded the protection of 300 valuable trees and the planting of 9,000 willow trees, beavers' favorite snack, to make sure the beavers get along with humans. In the long term, all this will have a positive effect on an area roughly the size of 9 Vatican cities combined. If you haven't heard of them, Planet Wild is a community that funds conservation missions like this every single month, protecting ecosystems, restoring wildlife, fighting pollution. And they always share their progress on YouTube. In this follow-up video, you can see exactly what your donations went towards. I've been a member for a long time now, and it's great to see the positive changes we can make together. If you want to join the next mission, the first 100 people using our code GOOD8 get their first month free. After that, you can give whatever amount feels right to you, and you can cancel anytime. Just scan the QR code or use the link below. If you want to see them in action first, check out their beaver mission, also linked below. Thanks a lot to Planet Wild for sponsoring this video, and now let's check out even more good news for our planet. In Colombia, cattle are one of the biggest causes of forest loss. To make room to raise cows for beef, ranchers cut and burn the rainforest, turning it into open land. For a long time, there was no way to trace it back to the farm. But that's now starting to change. Earlier this summer, Colombia passed a new law. Every cow in the country will now be traceable, from the farm where it was raised to the day it's sold. Until now, once beef reached the market, there was no way to know where it came from. Beef from a legal farm looked exactly the same as beef linked to cleared rainforest. In total, Colombia has lost around 3 million hectares of forest. largely due to cattle ranching, an area about the size of Belgium. And as long as their beef could still be sold, clearing more forest remained profitable. This new law is designed to break that cycle. Here's how it works. Those cows will now carry a digital record. If that record links the animal to illegally cleared land, its meat can be flagged and blocked from sale. And it's not just farmers who will have to follow the rules. Within the next 2 years, traders, meat blends and exporters will also have to prove their beef is linked to legal, deforestation-free land. They will do that by cross-checking government records on land ownership, cattle and forest laws. Soon there will even be a new label for producers who can prove their meat never came from cleared forest. So if that beef can't be sold, there's far less reason to clear the forest in the first place. That's the idea behind it. And conservation groups say it could be one of the strongest tools yet against illegal deforestation. For Colombia's forests, it closes a gap that stood open for years. For our next story, let's head to China. According to a recent study, the huge switch to electric cars has cleaned the air enough to prevent over 250,000 early deaths. China has long had some of the most polluted air in the world. In fact, roughly 1 in 4 deaths linked to air pollution happens in China. And traffic is a major part of the problem. Across its cities, millions of petrol and diesel cars pump exhaust fumes into the air every day. Breathing that pollution increases the risk of heart disease, strokes, and serious lung problems. So cutting down on those engines definitely helps. And that's exactly what's been happening. The country has gone electric extremely fast. More than 50% of new cars sold are electric, which raised a big question. Has all that actually cleaned the air? Scientists use satellites to measure the pollution across 150 cities. And they worked out what it would have been if the country had stuck with petrol since 2013. And the gap between the two was huge. Fine particle pollution had fallen by nearly 25%, and carbon monoxide fell by over 30%. Enough to prevent over 250,000 early deaths. The work isn't finished. Cars were just the beginning. For now though, millions of people in China's cities are already breathing easier. And there's promising news in medicine too, for one of the hardest cancers to treat. Because a new pill has roughly doubled how long patients with advanced pancreatic cancer can survive. Pancreatic cancer is still one of the deadliest cancers there is. It's usually caught late once it has already spread. By then, chemotherapy is often the only option. And when that stops working, there's been little left to try. For decades, doctors have struggled to find anything better. In more than 9 out of 10 cases, this cancer is driven by a faulty protein. But that protein was extremely hard to treat. But now, for the first time ever, there is a pill that can target it. It works like glue, locking onto the faulty protein and switching it off. And in a trial of 500 patients, it made a real difference. On average, patients on the pill lived about 13 months, compared to under 7 for those on chemotherapy. Close to double the median time. And while the response varies for every patient, those extra months mean the world to the families facing this cancer. The pill is now being fast-tracked and some patients can already get access to it. This isn't a cure yet. Cancer is still incredibly hard to beat. But this is a huge improvement against a disease where almost nothing has helped. Next up, some of the best news in years in the fight against HIV. For a long time, staying protected meant taking a pill every single day. Then came this medicine that is given as an injection just twice a year. In one trial with 3,200 participants across South Africa and Uganda, not a single person taking it caught HIV. And now, South Africa has become one of the first countries to roll it out. It's the country that needs it most, with the highest HIV burden on Earth. More than 8 million South Africans are living with HIV. And each year, well over 100,000 more are infected. Stopping those infections has been hard, because the main way to prevent HIV is a daily pill. Taking one every day for years on end is difficult to keep up with. This injection, on the other hand, is needed just twice a year. And it helps in another way too. A daily pill is hard to keep private, and in many places, being known to take one still carries real stigma. So far, there are enough doses for around 450,000 people for a year. But getting it to everyone who needs it won't be easy. Cost has been part of the problem. The drug's original price was $28,000. But that's changing fast. The company behind it now has authorized the production of cheaper generic versions. Those cost around $40, specifically for countries like South Africa. The country is now aiming to reach 3 million people within 3 years. Speaking of medical costs, here's another good news story from the US. Because over 97,000 people in Connecticut just had their medical debt wiped out. And they didn't have to do a thing. No forms, no phone calls. Just a letter in the mail one day telling them their hospital bill has been paid off. It went to the people who needed it most. Those with the biggest debts compared to what they earn. Behind it is a charity called Undo Medical Debt, working together with the state. And how they did it is the clever part. When someone can't pay a hospital bill, the debt is often worth very little, because the hospital may never collect it. They could take the person to court, but if someone can't pay, suing them won't change that. The debt just sits there and is worth less and less over time. So the charity buys it up cheaply and then cancels it. This time, a small sum wiped out $6.5 million in debt. That means for 97,000 people in Connecticut, a worry they had to live with has quietly disappeared. Real quick before I continue with the next story, I just want to say thank you, because it's so much fun making these videos and reading through all of your comments. Yeah, if you don't want to miss any more good news in the future, make sure to subscribe. Alright, let's get back to it. In the Atlantic lives one of the rarest animals on Earth, the North Atlantic right whale. But only around 380 are left. For years, their numbers fell, and barely any young were being born. But this year brought more baby whales than any season since 2009. 23 to be precise. And the reason behind it is a surprising one. Right whales feed on tiny sea creatures called copepods. A mother needs to eat huge amounts of them to have a baby, enough to carry it for over a year. For a long time, that food was scarce. Without enough fat stored up, the mothers were only having a baby every 7 to 10 years. For a healthy whale, it should be every 3 or 4. That gap was quietly holding back the whole species. But this year stood out. The whales have moved to new feeding grounds further north. The food there is richer and more nutritious. So the mothers are healthier and more of them can breed again. After years of decline, that's the strongest sign of hope in a long time. And that brings us to our last story of this episode. One of the most toxic man-made chemicals ever created has dropped by nearly 3/4 in wild birds. For decades, this chemical was used for liquid and stain resistance. It was used to make computer chips, food packaging, and waterproof clothing. They were built to last and never break down. But never breaking down also means it never truly goes away. So every time it was used, some of it escaped into the environment, washing off products or leaking from factories. From there, it moved into soil and rivers. And slowly, it built up inside local wildlife. And Canadian scientists wanted to know just how much had built up over the years. So they looked at the St. Lawrence River, which had carried chemical waste from factories for decades. Downstream, on a small island, lives a seabird called the northern gannet. Every year, gannets return to the nest in the same colony, generation after generation. That let scientists track this chemical in one place for over 55 years. At first, it kept climbing. By the 1990s, it had reached levels high enough to put the bird's health at real risk. Then, under pressure from governments, one of the world's biggest chemical makers began phasing it out. It stopped producing the chemical in the early 2000s. And a decade later in the US, regulators reached an agreement with manufacturers to stop production completely. The United Nations went even further, adding it to a global treaty that forced countries everywhere to restrict it. With the chemical now gone, the poisonous levels in the eggs began to fall. And by 2024, it had dropped by nearly 3/4. But manufacturers have since shifted to newer chemicals instead, which is why scientists say the monitoring needs to continue. But for the seabirds of the St. Lawrence, the drop in their eggs show what regulation can achieve. Alright, that's it for today's video. If you could protect one stretch of ocean forever, where would it be? Let me know in the comments below. Huge thank you to all of our channel members and of course to Blended Wild for making this possible. If you want to support projects like the one in Poland, you can scan the QR code or use the link below. And if you're curious how they're restoring beaver populations there, you can watch the video right here. Thank you for watching and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye!